Welcome to John Carter Stories. The contract on the table was worth $2.1 million. The pen was in my hand. The ink was ready. My business partner of 22 years, Douglas Merritt, was sitting across from me in the kind of suit that announces money before the man opens his mouth, watching me with the impatience of someone who has already spent a commission in his head. I am Walter Calloway, 61 years old. I built Calloway Construction Group from a single crew and a second-hand flatbed truck into one of the most recognized commercial building firms in the city. 40 years of poured concrete and structural steel and handshakes that meant something. That is who I am. That is who I was sitting in that restaurant that evening. A man who had never once walked away from a table before the ink was dry. But my hands were shaking. They had been shaking for 7 months. A fine, persistent tremor that I have been hiding the way a man hides anything that feels like weakness. Quietly, carefully, and alone, the dizzy spells came without warning and left without explanation. My doctor had run tests and found nothing conclusive. He called it stress. He called it the accumulated toll of a demanding life. He handed me supplements and told me to slow down. I had not slowed down. I had hidden it better. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you are listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. The restaurant was called Hartwell's, one of those places where the lighting is designed to make everything look like a painting, and the steak costs more than a working man's Friday. Douglas had chosen it because the partner from the other firm appreciated that sort of thing. Tablecloths, crystal, the quiet performance of importance. I was trying to focus on the signature line when I heard the footsteps, not the brisk, light-footed rhythm of the regular serving staff. These were slower, deliberate, carrying a weight that had nothing to do with the tray being held. I looked up out of instinct, the way you look up when something in the air changes without you being able to name it. She was moving to the dining room in a stained server's apron, 8 months pregnant, her frame too slight for what she was carrying. Her face pointed carefully at the floor in the way of someone who has learned that being seen is a danger. And then I saw her face. The world tilted. Eva Connolly, 26 years old, the woman my son Marcus had sworn on multiple occasions and in front of multiple people, had abandoned him for another man and disappeared to start over somewhere far away. That was the story. That was what he had told me. His voice carrying just enough injury to be convincing, his eyes meeting mine with the steadiness of someone who had practiced a lie until it felt like the truth. She was 3 feet away, 8 months pregnant, wearing a stained apron and keeping her eyes on the floor of a restaurant I happened to be sitting in. The pen in my hand went still. Douglas was still talking. Something about interest rates and equity splits. His voice had become a sound in another room entirely. I was watching Eva's hand shake as she set a glass of water on the table beside us, and I was watching her carefully avoid looking at my face, and I was understanding with the slow, cold clarity of a man whose foundation has just been tested that she had not run away at all. She had been hiding. "Good evening," she said. Her voice was a thin, careful version of the one I remembered. "Can I start you with something while you look over the menu?" "Eva," I said. The word came out quietly, just her name. But the effect was immediate. Her eyes flicked to mine for one fraction of a second, and what I saw in them was not relief at being recognized. It was raw terror. "I am just a server," she said. "I will bring your bread right away." She turned and walked toward the kitchen doors, and I watched her go, the uneven gait of a woman 8 months pregnant who has been on her feet for hours, and something broke open in my chest that I have not been able to fully close since. I set down the pen. I pushed back my chair. "Mitchell," Douglas started. "Stay here," I said. "Do not follow me." I walked through the kitchen doors. "Stay with me, because what Eva told me in that kitchen is the part that changed everything, including who I thought my son was and who I thought I had been." The kitchen was a different world. Hot, loud, the air thick with the smell of industrial cleaner and char, and particular organized chaos of a professional kitchen at full service. The head chef looked up from his station with the expression of a man whose territory has just been invaded, started to say something, and then looked at my face and decided against it. Eva was standing in a narrow corridor near the dry storage, her back against the wall, her hands pressed over her belly, her shoulders shaking in the tight, controlled way of someone who has taught themselves to cry without making any sound. I crossed the kitchen and stopped in front of her. The look she gave me was not the look of a woman relieved to see help arrive. It was a look of a woman calculating whether help was actually help or whether it was something far more dangerous wearing a familiar face. That look, that specific look, I have seen it since in my worst moments. The ones that come at 3 a.m, when you cannot stop your mind from asking how long she had been carrying it. "Eva," I said, "I am not here to hurt you. I need you to tell me the truth." She reached out and pulled me deeper into the corridor, away from the kitchen noise, her grip on my jacket sleeve fueled by pure adrenaline. And she looked at me for a long moment, the way you look at someone when you're deciding whether to trust them with something that could destroy you. Then she told me Marcus had not just pressured her to leave. He had spent months before she left systematically dismantling her sense of reality. Small things at first, the kind that are impossible to prove and easy to dismiss. Her memory being questioned, her account of conversations being contradicted, her feelings being described back to her as evidence of instability. Then larger things. A woman named Renata whom Marcus had introduced as a business associate and who had, without announcement or explanation, simply begun occupying increasing amounts of space in the house, in Eva's kitchen, at Eva's table, wearing Eva's things. She wore my anniversary dress to dinner in our own dining room, Eva said, and Marcus sat across from her and told me I was overreacting. She described the night. She decided to leave. Not a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet conversation in which Marcus had told her, in a controlled and reasonable tone of voice, that if she attempted to pursue any legal action related to pregnancy or the marriage, he would have her declared mentally unfit. He had names ready. He had a plan. She had taken what she could carry and disappeared before sunrise. Awe. And I stood in that corridor listening to her describe my son, as though listening to a description of a stranger, someone I shared a name with but had never actually known, and I felt the particular grief of a parent understanding that the thing they built and loved and believed in is not what they thought it was. It is a grief without a clean shape. It does not announce itself all at once. It arrives in pieces and keeps arriving. But then she said something that rearranged everything else. "Walter." Her voice dropped to barely a sound. Renata did not just appear after I left. She was already there, months before I left. She moved into the guest room under the cover of consulting work, and she brought something with her. She looked over my shoulder toward the kitchen doors. She called them the powders. Eva said, "She told Marcus they would help you retire early, that they would be untraceable, that you would simply seem to be aging." The kitchen noise around me became very distant. 7 months of dizzy spells. 7 months of tremors I could not explain. My doctor finding nothing because he was not looking for the right thing. I reached for the counter behind me. "I need you to come with me right now," I said. She looked at me for a moment, and then her knees buckled, not from weakness of character, from exhaustion that had finally reached its limit. 8 months of pregnancy, working full shifts on her feet, living in hiding, carrying the weight of what she knew about the people I trusted most. I caught her before she reached the floor. "Walter," she gasped. She pulled at my sleeve. "If he finds out you came to me, if Renata finds out," I already knew what came next. I had built enough structures to know what a foundation looks like when someone has been quietly removing the load-bearing elements one by one. My partner, my money, my morning coffee, my health. And somewhere in that city, the woman who had engineered all of it was sitting in what used to be my daughter-in-law's home, waiting for news that I had simply declined. I took off my coat and wrapped it around her. "You are safe," I said. "I am going to make sure of that." And then I lifted her and walked out the service exit into the February cold. What I found in the next 48 hours is something that still makes me go quiet when I think about it. My driver, Raymond, has been with me for 19 years. He has seen me through 2 recessions, 1 divorce, a hurricane that destroyed a completed project 3 days before handover, and every other defining moment of the last 2 decades. He did not ask a single question when I called him that night. He simply brought the car around. We took Eva directly to Penn General. I carried her through the emergency entrance and did not stop walking until someone in a white coat took her from my arms. She was suffering from severe dehydration, anemia, and exhaustion so deep it begun affecting the pregnancy. The attending physician, a woman named Dr. Callahan, with the measured calm of someone who has long since stopped being surprised by what people survive, told me the baby was stable but that his mother had been running on nearly nothing for weeks. I sat in that waiting room, and I thought about how many times I had eaten at Hartwell's. How many times I had sat in that restaurant 200 yards from where she was working double shifts and hiding and trying to hold herself together, and I had not known she was there. That thought is one I keep coming back to. I had her discharged under a different name and moved her to a private floor I arranged through a contact at the hospital board. Then I went to work. I called in a forensic accountant named Claire Whitmore, a woman with the analytical stillness of someone who has seen every variation of financial deception and stopped being shocked by any of them. I gave her Eva's ledger, a small black notebook Eva had kept hidden in the lining of a backpack, and I told her to find everything. Claire found $780,000 moved through shell companies that I had never authorized. Every transfer timed with precision to coincide with moments when I had been incapacitated, dizzy spells that left me bedridden for hours, moments when Marcus had offered to step in as my proxy at board meetings, moments when my digital signature had apparently been applied to documents I had no memory of authorizing. He used my tablet, Claire said, her voice flat, while you were sleeping through one of your episodes. That is how the transfers were processed. I sat in that small office smelling of printer paper and stale air, and I felt the particular nausea of a man seeing his own reflection clearly for the first time. Then I called a toxicologist, a man named Dr. Alan Foster, who had consulted on industrial cases in my firm years earlier, and who I trusted precisely because he owed me nothing. I drove to his private lab alone, told no one where I was going, rolled up my sleeve, and let him take what he needed. He called me the next day. His voice was careful in the way of someone delivering information they wish they were not carrying. "Walter," he said, "it is arsenic, industrial grade, small doses administered over a sustained period. Whoever is doing this knows exactly what they are doing. They want you to decline gradually. They want it to look like age." I sat in my study for a long time after that call. The morning tea Marcus brought me every day. The one he had started bringing after I mentioned to him that I had been skipping breakfast and that my energy was low. The one he set on my desk with the particular care of an attentive son. The one with the chipped rim that Renata had apparently specified, according to Eva, as the one to use consistently. I had been drinking my own funeral 1 cup at a time for 7 months. Now I need to stop here and ask you something, because I want you to understand the weight of what comes next. Have you ever built something across your entire life, given it every hour and every decision and every sacrifice you had to offer, and then discovered that the person you trusted with your name was slowly, deliberately, methodically taking it apart from the inside? Leave your answer in the comments, because what I did next was either the smartest decision I ever made or the saddest one. I am still not entirely sure which. I began pretending to get worse. Dr. Foster gave me a protocol. A series of chelating agents to flush the toxin from my system, small and bitter and chalky, hidden inside my daily vitamin bottle, so that no one watching would see anything change. Every morning I took my actual medication, while appearing to take only the supplements Marcus had provided. Every day I could feel the slow return of my own strength, the tremors quieting, the fog lifting, the world sharpening back into focus. And every day I performed the opposite. I practice in front of the mirror, the slight hesitation before reaching for a glass, the shallow breath of a man whose stamina is failing, the wandering gaze of someone whose concentration is beginning to fracture. I had spent 40 years reading structures, learning how to see what was hidden inside a framework. Now I applied that same precision to the performance of my own decline. Marcus came every morning with the tea, and I drank the saved version while appearing to drink his. I watched him. His confidence was growing in the particular way that confidence grows in a person who believes they are winning something uncontested. He started removing things from my study. A photograph of my late wife and me at the groundbreaking of our first major project. A framed letter from the city acknowledging our work on the waterfront development. He placed them face down in a box with the clinical efficiency of a man clearing a space. He was removing me from my own room while I was still breathing inside it. One morning, he brought a document. He set it beside the tea with a casually concerned expression and said he had taken the liberty of preparing a medical authorization giving him proxy authority over company decisions in the event of cognitive decline. He said the board had suggested it. He said it was just a precaution. He said it with the voice of a caring son and the eyes of a man checking a box. I looked at it for a long time. Then I looked at him, and I understood that the boy I had raised, the one I had handed everything to piece by piece over 30 years because I loved him and believed in him, had been planning this for longer than I want to calculate. Not out of desperation or confusion or a moment of weakness. Deliberately, systematically, with help. He thought I was too far gone to see it clearly. He was wrong about that, and his being wrong about it was the only advantage I needed. While Marcus believed I was fading, I was building. Raymond delivered documents to Claire Whitmore. Claire built the financial case. Dr. Foster certified the toxicology findings. A private investigator named Sullivan tracked Renata to a chemical supply warehouse on the edge of the city, where she had signed for restricted materials, using a stolen employee identification belonging to 2 men Marcus had previously fired. Those men, both of whom I had terminated personally after Marcus presented what I now understood were fabricated evidence files, had families. They had mortgages. They had spent months defending their reputations against accusations that my own son had manufactured. The guilt of that sits in me like something that will not move. I made those calls personally. I invited them back. I gave them what they were owed and more. But there are things you cannot simply hand someone back, and that is one of them. Meanwhile, Eva was recovering at the private villa I kept in the older part of the city, a property Marcus did not know about, one I had purchased quietly years earlier and never discussed. I had a nursery prepared there. When she first walked into that room and smelled the paint and the lavender I had asked the decorator to use, and saw the crib that had been assembled and waiting, she stood in the doorway and pressed her hand over her mouth and did not say anything for a long time. "That is safety," she finally said. "It smells like safety." I set a trap. I sent Marcus a text inviting him to the hotel suite I kept for out-of-town meetings. I told him I wanted to discuss a final arrangement for the company's future. I knew what that language meant to him. It meant he was about to receive what he had been working toward. It meant I was surrendering. He arrived at noon with Renata beside him. They walked in with the particular energy of people who believe the outcome of something is already settled in their favor. Sullivan's team had wired the room the night before. Detective Ramirez was waiting in the adjoining suite with 2 officers. I sat at the desk and let them come to me. Tell me in the comments. And if you have dealt with something similar, share your story. You are not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because the moment those doors opened and Marcus walked in with that smile, that specific smile I had once been so proud of, is the moment I want you to stay with me for. Dr. Foster gave me a protocol, a series of chelating agents to flush the toxin from my system, small and bitter and chalky, hidden inside my daily vitamin bottle, so that no one watching would see anything change. Every morning I took my actual medication, while appearing to take only the supplements Marcus had provided. Every day I could feel the slow return of my own strength, the tremors quieting, the fog lifting, the world sharpening back into focus. And every day I performed the opposite. I practiced in front of the mirror, the slight hesitation before reaching for a glass, the shallow breath of a man whose stamina is failing, the wandering gaze of someone whose concentration is beginning to fracture. I had spent 40 years reading structures, learning how to see what was hidden inside a framework. Now I applied that same precision to the performance of my own decline. Marcus came every morning with the tea, and I drank the saved version while appearing to drink his. I watched him. His confidence was growing in the particular way that confidence grows in a person who believes they are winning something uncontested. He started removing things from my study. A photograph of my late wife and me at the groundbreaking of our first major project. A framed letter from the city acknowledging our work on the waterfront development. He placed them face down in a box with the clinical efficiency of a man clearing a space. He was removing me from my own room while I was still breathing inside it. One morning, he brought a document. He set it beside the tea with a casually concerned expression and said he had taken the liberty of preparing a medical authorization giving him proxy authority over company decisions in the event of cognitive decline. He said the board had suggested it. He said it was just a precaution. He said it with the voice of a caring son and the eyes of a man checking a box. I looked at it for a long time. Then I looked at him, and I understood that the boy I had raised, the one I had handed everything to piece by piece over 30 years because I loved him and believed in him, had been planning this for longer than I want to calculate. Not out of desperation or confusion or a moment of weakness. Deliberately, systematically, with help. He thought I was too far gone to see it clearly. He was wrong about that, and his being wrong about it was the only advantage I needed. While Marcus believed I was fading, I was building. Raymond delivered documents to Claire Whitmore. Claire built the financial case. Dr. Foster certified the toxicology findings. A private investigator named Sullivan tracked Renata to a chemical supply warehouse on the edge of the city, where she had signed for restricted materials, using a stolen employee identification belonging to 2 men Marcus had previously fired. Those men, both of whom I had terminated personally after Marcus presented what I now understood were fabricated evidence files, had families. They had mortgages. They had spent months defending their reputations against accusations that my own son had manufactured. The guilt of that sits in me like something that will not move. I made those calls personally. I invited them back. I gave them what they were owed and more. But there are things you cannot simply hand someone back, and that is one of them. Meanwhile, Eva was recovering at the private villa I kept in the older part of the city, a property Marcus did not know about, one I had purchased quietly years earlier and never discussed. I had a nursery prepared there. When she first walked into that room and smelled the paint and the lavender I had asked the decorator to use, and saw the crib that had been assembled and waiting, she stood in the doorway and pressed her hand over her mouth and did not say anything for a long time. "That is safety," she finally said. "It smells like safety." I set a trap. I sent Marcus a text inviting him to the hotel suite I kept for out-of-town meetings. I told him I wanted to discuss a final arrangement for the company's future. I knew what that language meant to him. It meant he was about to receive what he had been working toward. It meant I was surrendering. He arrived at noon with Renata beside him. They walked in with the particular energy of people who believe the outcome of something is already settled in their favor. Sullivan's team had wired the room the night before. Detective Ramirez was waiting in the adjoining suite with 2 officers. I sat at the desk and let them come to me. Tell me in the comments. And if you have dealt with something similar, share your story. You are not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because the moment those doors opened and Marcus walked in with that smile, that specific smile I had once been so proud of, is the moment I want you to stay with me for. They walked in at noon exactly. Marcus was wearing a suit I had bought him for his 30th birthday. He looked better than he had in weeks, his stride carrying the loosened confidence of a man who believes he is minutes from the finish line. Renata was beside him, her eyes moving around the room with the quick assessing intelligence of someone who has been in enough situations like this to know how to read an exit. I did not stand to greet them. I gestured toward the chairs across the desk and let them sit. "You look better than I expected, Dad," Marcus said. His voice had the careful warmth of a man maintaining a performance. "Let us get these papers signed so you can finally rest. You have given this company everything. It is time to let someone else carry it." I looked at him for a moment, at the boy I had driven to his first baseball practice, at the young man I had brought onto job sites on summer weekends because I wanted him to understand how things were built, at the face I had watched grow from something that fit in the crook of my arm into the face of a person I no longer recognized. "The only thing resting today," I said, "is your access to my company." I reached into the drawer and placed the toxicology report on the desk between us. The color left his face with a specific immediacy. Renata's hand moved toward the document. I caught her wrist with a steadiness that told her immediately my illness had been a performance, and I held it there while she read the words "lethal intent confirmed by sustained dosage pattern," and watched her understand that every X in the room was already covered. Marcus tried. He tried several things in quick succession. The way a man tries things when the ground has disappeared beneath him and he is cycling through options with increasing desperation. He said I was confused. He said the tremors had affected my judgment. He said Renata had nothing to do with anything, and he had always only been trying to protect me. He said Eva had stolen from the company, and he had the documentation to prove it. He said things that he had presumably rehearsed and that now, in this room, sounded exactly like what they were. I opened the forensic audit and walked him through it. Every transfer, every shell company, every timestamp that aligned with one of my incapacitated mornings. Every moment he had stood in the boardroom presenting my proxy signature on authorizations I had never seen. He watched the paper trail appear in front of him with the expression of a man watching a building he thought was standing fall in real time. Every dollar has a record, I said. Yours ran out. He looked at the door to the adjoining suite. Something in him, some final instinct, made him lunge to the handle. Detective Ramirez stepped out before he reached it. 2 officers followed. The room filled with particular sound of authority arriving with finality, badges and commands, and the mechanical punctuation of handcuffs closing. Marcus dropped to his knees on the carpet of that hotel suite, and I watched it happen with a stillness inside me that I have tried to describe to people and cannot. It was not triumph. I want to be honest about that. There was no surge of satisfaction, no feeling of justice completed. There was only a deep, aching quiet, the kind that settles in after something enormous has been removed, something that had weight even if the weight was poison. He said through everything as the officers lifted him, "You traded a son for a stranger's child." I did not answer him. I watched him go. Renata moved for the service entrance, and the moment Marcus was being let out, she was faster than I had accounted for. Sullivan's radio confirmed she had broken the perimeter at the villa within 20 minutes, and I understood in that moment that the trap for Marcus had been, for Renata, a diversion. She was not running to an airport. She was running to the one thing I had left to lose. I was already moving before Sullivan finished the sentence. Raymond drove through the city with the focused urgency of a man who understands that speed and judgment are not opposites. I had left the back gate of the villa unlatched deliberately, instructed the police net to be positioned inside rather than at the perimeter, and when Renata arrived and entered the gate and reached the inner corridor, she found Detective Ramirez waiting for her on the other side of it. She was led out in restraints past the window of the nursery, where the baby was sleeping. I stood in the driveway of my own property and watched the police cruiser pull away with its lights moving across the trees, and I felt something I had not felt in over 7 months. I could breathe without tasting metal. The tea was just tea again. The air was just air. My hands, holding the iron gate post, were completely still. 3 days later, Eva's water broke. I will not pretend I was calm. I was not calm. I was a 61-year-old man who had spent the last several months being slowly poisoned and had barely slept in a week, and was now pacing the corridor of a private maternity ward at 2 a.m, trying to remember the last time I had eaten a full meal. The baby came at 3:17. Dr. Callahan placed him in my arms 20 minutes later, wrapped in blue, 6 pounds and 4 ounces of absolute determination. He had a small birthmark on his left shoulder in the exact shape, and I am not exaggerating this, of a cornerstone. "Hello," I said. My voice came out nothing like I intended. I had meant to say something measured and proper, the way a man of my generation greets a significant moment. Instead, what came out was a sound I did not have a word for, somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and a breath taken after being underwater for a very long time. His name is Owen. He gripped my index finger and did not let go. 2 months later, I stood in the boardroom of Calloway Construction Group for the last time as its sole authority. I presented the recovered forensic documentation to the full board, detailed the embezzlement, accepted the resignations of 3 senior directors whose names Renata had listed in a letter she had apparently intended as insurance, and watched the rot leave the room the way structural damage leaves a building after proper remediation. Slow, thorough, and permanent. I reinstated Leo Garrett and Marcus Thorne, the 2 employees my son had framed using their credentials for his transfers. Leo had a daughter who had been born during the months he spent clearing his name. Marcus Thorne had nearly lost his apartment. I handed them both settlement envelopes and senior contracts and looked them in the eye when I said, "I believed the wrong person. I am sorry." The look on Leo's face when he understood it was real that one I carry with me. I established a legal defense fund for any employee ever wrongly accused within the firm, funded entirely from the recovered offshore accounts. 30 years of building an empire, and the thing I am most proud of is a fund that says to the people who work for me, you will not be destroyed by someone with more power and fewer scruples than you. Eva became the head of internal audit and ethics at the private firm I transitioned Calloway Group into. She sat behind that desk with a composure built not from ease but from everything she had survived, and she said, I know exactly where the shadows hide in a company like this. She was right. She still is. I had her parents, Silas and Martha Connolly, brought to the city for the Stone Foundation launch gala. They arrived in clothes that smelled of wood smoke and cedar. Two people from a small town in the mountains who had spent months being pressured by my son to sign documents declaring their daughter unstable, holding out for her with the quiet, stubborn loyalty of people who know exactly who their child is. When Eva saw them across that ballroom, she went absolutely still. Her glass began to tremble, and then she made a sound, a single broken syllable of their names, and crossed the room to them. I sat back and watched that. I have built towers in this city. I have signed contracts that move hundreds of millions of dollars. I have shaken hands with mayors and governors and people whose names are in the newspapers. Not one of those moments felt like what I felt watching Eva Connolly walk across a ballroom floor toward her parents. That is the thing I built that mattered. One morning in September, I was sitting on a bench in Rittenhouse Square. The kind of cool, bright morning that feels like the city exhaling after a long summer. Eva was walking Owen in his stroller along the path in front of me, and Silas was beside her pointing out pigeons and making Owen laugh, and Martha was holding a cup of coffee with both hands and watching her daughter with a specific expression of a person who had been frightened for a very long time and is only just beginning to believe the fear is over. Silas sat down beside me after a while. His hands were the hands of a man who has worked with him his entire life. He looked at the skyline in the distance, the buildings I had spent 4 decades putting there, and he said, You look like a man who has finally put something down. I have, I told him. I just had to figure out what was first. Owen was brought over and placed in my lap. He gripped my finger the way he always does, with that unreasonable strength, and looked at my face with the serious dark eyes that will eventually belong to someone I cannot yet imagine. He has your stubbornness, Eva said from behind us. Good, I said. A stone should know what is worth holding on to. I wrote in my journal that evening. I have been writing every evening since the hospital. The journal has a technical appendix containing the private keys to a blockchain trust one established for Owen, funds that will release at his 25th birthday on the condition that Hannah's ethics department has approved his character. I did not build him a kingdom. I built him a test. I wrote this, and I want you to hear it, because it is the truest thing I have put to paper in 61 years of living. The greatest thing I ever built was not a building. It was the bridge back to the people I had failed to protect, back to the version of myself that existed before the weight of accumulation made me mistake money for meaning, back to the understanding that a legacy is not a tower. It is a small hand that will not let go of yours in the morning sun. If you are watching this and you have felt the particular weight of someone you trusted completely turning that trust into a weapon, I want you to know this. You do not have to be finished by that. The fact that someone was willing to spend enormous effort to destroy you is, in its backwards way, a testament to what you are worth protecting. I was poisoned for 7 months, and I survived it, not because I am exceptional, because I finally understood what I was fighting for. His name is Owen. He is 6 pounds and 4 ounces, and he has a birthmark shaped like a cornerstone, and he cannot yet walk or talk or understand a single word I say to him. But when I hold him, he grips my finger and does not let go. And that, after everything, is enough. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who needs it today. Subscribe if you have not. Leave a comment below. I read every single one. And take care of yourselves. Build something worth keeping. I will see you in the next one.